My name's Andy McNeil, and I'm with the Compassionate Friends, and I'm certainly honored to bring this webinar to you today. Our topic is on understanding within the family, looking at the different ways that we all grieve and cope. One of the things that I've experienced to be true for most families and communities, for that matter, is that we don't all grieve alike. And that sometimes can create a little bit of conflict or maybe misunderstanding, uh, or rightfully so concern, maybe concern about another person in your family. And then I also, with this topic, I'm hopeful that it can be information that people can share with family and friends who maybe just don't get it and don't understand how to be helpful or supportive to other people. And it really starts with that level of understanding. For some reason, we just want to fix people. We want people to be okay. We want people to go back to the way they were. We want people to grieve in a certain way. And if you've listened to some of my past webinars, I have a lot of information where I talk about myths in our society about what grief is and what grief isn't. And many of the myths around grief are the most quoted in our society. And so that does leave people to feel alienated and alone. But even outside of that, if you look at the outside and people's understanding in society, and it might be misguided, very often, even within bereavement, those who are grieving sometimes look at other people who aren't grieving like them and wonder what's wrong with them. Because this is what grief is, and this is how I grieve. Why isn't my wife? Why isn't my child? Why isn't my friend? Why are they not grieving in the way that I'm grieving? Maybe they're not really grieving. And we become overly, or not maybe not even overly, but we just become concerned. Rightfully so. We worry about the people in our lives and want to make sure that they're healthy and that they're okay. And so I thought we would spend a little time and just look at this idea of different ways of grieving and coping. Now, just a couple of things up front before I start sharing my slides and we get into the topic. Grief is personal, and so we don't all grieve the same. Some of the things I'm going to present over the next hour are we're going to be talking about grief in general. And I understand that there are nuances that are very specific for people. And so I don't want you to take this and run with it and say that I'm saying that everyone fits in one of these boxes or one of these circles. Not what I'm saying at all. Actually, what I'm hoping will happen through this webinar is that we'll all reconsider what reconsider our thoughts about others, and that others should grieve like us. And rather than approaching people in uh, in the fashion of telling them how to grieve, that we approach people and we meet them where they are, wherever they are, and whatever that looks like in their grief. All of us have our way we feel most comfortable being in the world. And I think it's true about grief and about coping. We all have our way that we feel most comfortable grieving, sharing our grief, not sharing our grief, expressing, not expressing, whatever that might look like. And so we're going to look at this sort of as a big picture. We'll zero down into a few things over the next hour. But my hope is that we'll come out of it, all of us, with a greater sense of understanding of what others might be going through, not just what I'm going through and what that looks like for me. Second thing, though, that I want to say is I hope that maybe during this hour, some things that we'll share might shed light on your grief style or your coping style. Or maybe you'll glean some things during this time and say, well, you know what? I don't lean into that as much, but I think I could. And maybe it's something that you might choose to lean into yourself. Because the reality is, although we have our ways we feel comfortable being in the world, all of us have had to find ways to be outside of that comfort zone, maybe because of a work or job requirement, or maybe school or some community event or organization we're connected to, that it got us out of our comfort zone. And what we found when we got out of that comfort zone is that we grew as a person. Maybe we developed skills and abilities, or maybe we learned something about ourselves that we never knew was true. And so maybe during this hour, some things that we talk about might bring that up for you. Maybe there's some things where you say, yeah, my tendency is are these things, or my tendencies are these things, but maybe I could lean into this other thing, and grow and learn something about myself as well. So, with that and with those kind of caveats in place, um, let me share my screen, and we're just going to really just kind of talk about this this idea for a bit here. Okay. All right. So there's the title, Understanding Others in My Family, the Different Ways We Cope and Grieve. Now, one of the things that I wanted to start with is just to talk about the idea of personality. If you think about the unique nature of each person and how, who we are in the world, again, to use that other, what I said before, how we feel most comfortable being in the world. But it's really our preferences of how we're in the world. Now, there are a lot of different personality inventories, and you may have some that you've done in the past, Myers-Briggs. There's other things that we use different, like there's one I think that uses colors, there's another one that uses shapes. Um, One of the oldest tools out there was developed, I think, back in the early 1900s, and just sort of used along the way these basic categories. Now, certainly some of the language may be a little older kind of language than we might use today, that type of thing. What I like about this, the big five, you take the word ocean, and the first letter of each word represents some area having to do with our personality. What I like about this model is it shows things on a continuum. So you're looking at, again, ocean, openness, conscientiousness, um, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Okay. If you look at each of those, the idea is that all of us are on a spectrum with this. We may not be all the way at one end or the other, but we might reside somewhere in the middle. And I kind of like that visual for myself. And so I just wanted to offer this out to you because I think a good place to start when we're talking about different styles of grieving is recognizing that a lot of uh, that our personality, our preferences of being in the world impact the way that we grieve and we cope. It tends to be a connection between the two. Now, there are other things that influence our grief and how we grieve. Certainly, the nature of our relationship with the person who died has an impact on our grief and our grief experience, and why some people grieve one way and others might grieve another way. The role that we played in that person's life has a huge impact on how we grieve. Also, the circumstances of the death can impact the way that we grieve. All of those things have an influence and an impact. As far as our grief style, a lot of that is connected to how we feel comfortable being in the world. So I would just encourage you, if you've never done a personality inventory or anything like that, or you want to better understand the people in your family, all of you do some sort of a personality inventory and discover what your preferences are. That knowledge is power, I always say. And if we can get good information about ourselves, about the other people in our lives, it will help us better understand why people do certain things and why other people do other things, uh, based on, again, their personality and their preferences of being in the world. So with this inventory, I put website down at the bottom, you really can just type in, big5-test.com, and you can actually pull, there's an inventory you can just do, and then it'll come out and sort of give you an indication of what you're kind of where you are on the spectrum. Um, Again, I wouldn't get too hung up on all the definitions and things and look at things and say, well, I'm not messy. Uh, they've chosen certain words and it might not be the words that you would choose, but recognizing that there's this spectrum that we all kind of or reside within, and and just a way to better understand yourself and others, and kind of what makes them um uh you know what makes them tick, right? Another thing that you can do besides just taking a personality inventory or having other people do that is, if you want to increase your understanding, take out a piece of paper. Think about the people in your life. It could be people in your family. It could also be friends or neighbors or really anyone, but someone who is in your community. Maybe you all share a certain thing. You grieve in different ways. Um, think about those people. Write down each of their names on a piece of paper. Okay, those people who are closest to you, who are in that circle, who you bump into with your grief. Write each of their names on that paper, leave a space in between each name, and then write down 5 adjectives under each person that describe that person in your opinion. Just 5 adjectives that would describe them. And then you can ask other people to do that about you. Because sometimes there may be things about ourselves that we don't quite see fully until we hear it from other people. So do that and start by that sense of understanding. And then when you look at that, start there and say, look, this describes that person. And one of the things that's true about most of us, not that we can't change, because the reality is, we've talked about this before, grief is a transformational process and we do change. It changes us. But there's this basic person, this self, this personality, this preference that's sort of us. And that doesn't move easily. It takes time and pressure and all sorts of things for that to happen. And so, really, as you begin to put words to describe the people in your life, say to yourself, it's not my job to change them or move them from those things. It's my job to understand them, to be understanding, to have some sort of level of knowledge about who they are, so I can know how to be with them, not on my terms, but I can learn how to be with them on their terms. And try that in some of your relationships. Just start there and say, I'm going to be present with this person as they are, not as I want to make them. Now, let me put a caveat or two in here. If you're in a relationship and that relationship is abusive or destructive in your life, I'm not talking about accepting abuse or destruction or those things that would harm you as a person. So don't hear me say that. I am talking about when someone just has a different approach to how they are dealing with the death of their person. Maybe you're more outgoing and expressive, and they are quiet and don't want to talk about it. They just want to go and find something to stay busy. It's typically in those scenarios that we find ourselves bumping heads, or fear, or the desire to go tell someone else how to grieve or what to do. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about destructive or hateful or harmful behavior to one another or other individuals. We do not have to tolerate abuse or that type of behavior from anyone for any reason. There's never an excuse to to treat people poorly in that way. Um, I am talking about people's approach, though, to how they grieve and becoming more understanding in that. When we begin to be more understanding of other people, it closes the gap that separates us in our relationships. At some point, what happens is the ways that they're not like you become insignificant and unimportant when you close that gap, when you seek understanding, as opposed to how am I going to convince them that they need to do it my way, that this is what it looks like, or this is what they should be doing, right? So start with understanding. That's where I wanted us to start today. First, understand. Then some dialogue can happen, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But first, let's understand the person. Now, I just pulled this slide together because I wanted to have some words up here. Again, those of you who've heard me present before, you know that words, I think words have power and they have meaning. I just wanted to get some words up here about different experiences in grief. Because what I found to be true is though we may be expressing our grief in different ways, we might find when we stop to seek understanding, we might find that we actually are having similar experiences. We're just reacting to it in different ways. We're expressing it in different ways. But we may be actually experiencing some of the same things. So another thing that you can do, a good exercise in your family, have everyone in your family think of 5 words that would describe their grief and have them write it on a piece of paper. Just 5 words. Think of those words, write them down, and see if any of you don't have some words in common. That can bring you, that's something that can bridge you. You may not be expressing it in the same way, but you may be having similar experiences. And when we can connect on those experiences, that makes a difference. So seek understanding first, and then seek some clarity and look for common experiences that you may all be having. Again, not that you're expressing it in the same way or behaving in the same way, but the experience you have may be very similar. And most of us, grief impacts us mentally, emotionally, physically, socially, and spiritually. Most of us are affected in all of those ways. And so we can even just start there. But then when you start putting these specific words in there, overwhelmed, confused, longing, isolation, fatigue, hopelessness, exhaustion, adjusting, acceptance, all of those words that you put in there, you start naming words, you will start to find places where you crisscross, where you connect around your grief. Now, I've had people who've said, well, but what if the people in my family won't do that? What if they just, that's not what they're going to do? Then my answer is don't push someone to do it. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. How you can be with someone who is not doing it the same way you are and what that looks like in our lives. I'm not saying it's easy. None of this is easy. Anytime we talk about grief and the struggle of that, I don't want anyone to ever think that I'm saying it's easy, because it's not. It's easy to talk about and say when I'm putting up slides, but it's harder to do. We all know that. So seek understanding, seek common experiences that you might be able to come together around. And then let's just look at this kind of a big picture of grief and coping styles. Now, there is research out there on different styles of grieving. Kenneth Doka has a lot of information and material and things on this topic. He actually co-wrote a book. I'm going to real quick scan to the end here because I want to point this out. If you want to take a picture of their slide, again, I'm glad to share these slides with folks. We'll just email it out to everyone who's on here live. But he wrote a book with Dr. Martin, and it is Grieving Beyond Gender, Understanding the Ways Men and Women Mourn. And one of the things that some of the phrases that they coined out of that, we're going to spend a little bit of time with, because there has been a tendency to decide, well, women grieve this way and men grieve that way. And it's not that simple and cut and dry. And so they've given us a couple of words, intuitive and instrumental, and looking at, and so instead of saying male and female, it's intuitive and instrumental, and that's fluid. it can go across gender, right? And all of us again have our way of feeling most comfortable being in the world. So if we have to pair this, go back to the first slide I showed, pair it with understanding a person's personality, their preferences in the world, how they prefer to be in the world. Then look at what is their grief like? What is it like for them? And then we then go to this level and say, how do they tend to approach their grief and really also their coping? So Doka uh, suggests that some people have an intuitive approach to grieving, some people have an instrumental approach, and some have a blended approach. Probably many of us have somewhat of a blended. Again, think of it as a continuum. I'm not just one or the other, but I may lean more toward one or the other. And again, that is somehow connected to my personality and my preferences in the world. And then uh, this blending of the two, these boxes that I have at the bottom, somatic, creative, balance, support seeking, contemplative, that can be true of intuitive grievers and instrumental grievers. And I added these, and we're going to spend a little bit of time on them because these are really five areas where people tend to find themselves falling on a continuum of coping or not choosing to cope in those areas or just not coping well in those areas, whatever that might look like. So we're going to look at all of this. I just wanted you to see it in one big picture: intuitive, instrumental, and then blended. And then we're going to talk about somatic, creative, balance, support seeking, and contemplative um, styles. Let's start with intuitive. An intuitive griever uh, tends to be someone like their strengths would be that their grief is more there's outward emotional expression. They tend to be more in tune with their emotions, more focused there. So some of the strengths are that there is emotional expression. So they're getting it from here and out there. The ability to share feelings with others openly. So that creates a social support. So less isolation. They tend to seek more social support, connected to their internal pain. So it's not something that's being shoved down. It kind of shows up later, and they're not sure where it came from. They're experiencing it in real time. Tend to lean into this sense of meaning making, kind of contemplating their grief, spending time with it, and then reflecting on the impact grief has had on their life. That's sort of that intuitive person, intuitive griever. Okay. Some of the challenges to this approach to grieving is feeling overwhelmed by grief because I do lean into my emotions and emotional expression that it can be hard and difficult to find breaks from my grief, ways to distract myself because I'm so carry it everywhere that I go. I quite often can be physically and mentally exhausted. There might be trouble with daily routines. There might be a challenge to find words for grief because I'm feeling it, but I'm not sure what to call it, um, what words to actually give it. And then sometimes a little challenge with balancing grief and daily life again. So how do I feel plugged into daily life when I'm disconnected over here and I can't seem to balance the two? Um, so that's your intuitive person. Now, I don't know if any of you can certainly put it in the chat if you start to see yourself in some of this, say, yeah, that's kind of like more like I am, or no, that's my spouse, partner, friend, child, whatever that might look like. Begin to think about what that is for you or for others. And then instrumental uh, approach to grieving is typically there's this quiet strength, right? It's typically the person who people say things like, gosh, you are so strong. I don't know how you're carrying yourself right now. Right? It's that sense that this person uh, they don't show a lot of emotional expression. Um, but that person also is the person who tends to be a steady support to others. So they're that caregiver for other people, um, and not as emotionally expressive. Um, they're action focused. This instrumental person tends to go and do things. They might hike or walk or do some physical activity or go out and work with wood, build something, garden, knit, creating creating something as opposed to being emotional about something. There's this so talking about there is that emotional control. They tend to be a person who's more task oriented, so it's sort of managing tasks as opposed to expressing feelings, and then typically more goal oriented. Want to know, like, what's the end game here? Tell me what to do to get to where I need to go. Would be that kind of instrumental approach to things. The challenges for an instrumental griever is suppressed feelings, shoving them down inside, and then they not sure why irritable all the time. Not sure why I'm so angry. I might be experiencing some of those feelings. Even guilt sometimes can be a suppressed feeling, and we're not sure why. We might find ourselves projecting our feelings on others because we're not addressing our own feelings. Um, Maybe misunderstood grief. Again, these are the folks who people will tend to look at and say, I'm not sure they're doing it right. I haven't seen them cry. I haven't seen them show emotion. I'm worried about them. Um, it can also take a physical or emotional toll. Again, suppressing feelings. We can carry grief in our bodies, and it affects our bodies. We've talked about this before, where we can, when we are experiencing a high level of anxiety over a long period of time, our body naturally produces cortisol when we are anxious, or worried or afraid, and it can overproduce cortisol where it actually becomes damaging to our bodies. Cortisol is that hormone. It shuts down our reproductive system. It can shut down uh, our digestive system. Often can affect our brain, our frontal lobes, our ability to think and reason in the moment. Can be impacted. All of that, and really it shuts down our body to where we have, the fight or flight reaction. Right? It's about protecting ourselves in that moment. So all of the other things that we might be thinking about are not there. Um, there can be delayed reactions where we say, why now? Why is all this coming up now? Why did it not come up before? Social relationship strain can happen because often isolation will happen because we don't want to go around people and have them ask us how we're doing because I don't want to go there. I'm focusing on something else. And that's often, again, can lead to isolation in our grief. Okay. So intuitive and instrumental. And many of us live sort of in a little bit of both of these worlds. Some of us may be much more intuitive, some much more instrumental, but think of it as a continuum. Don't think of it as just these are the only two categories. There's probably a bunch of categories that are within and under these categories. But these are some ways to think about it. So if you have someone in your life and you say, I just don't understand, I don't understand how they're grieving. I don't understand why they do it this way. It makes no sense to me. What I'm saying is that person, that's how they're wired. It's who they are. And so it's much more difficult for any of us to move the needle when it's in our wiring. It doesn't mean we can't lean into some other things. And that's where this idea of of blended, this blended approach. This is where personal agency comes in, where we say, okay, there are some challenges with my tendency to grieve in this way. Are there ways and areas that I can grow that will help me to better cope as I'm walking through my journey. Now, I want to say this. It's a question that an individual asks themselves. It's not for us to tell them how they need to. And I'll talk about it in a moment. It doesn't mean we can't ever have honest conversations and express our concern about someone. If we're truly concerned about their health and their safety, we can have that conversation. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment and ways that we can do that that's not judgmental, but that is relational and and building a strong relationship where we're able to have those conversations in a better way. But let's talk about some of these blended components of coping: somatic, creative, balanced, support seeking, and contemplative um, components of a blended way of coping. So some of the somatic coping strategies that we can use in our life are it's in the word. It's very physical things that we can do. Quite often, if we find ourselves not able to uh, uh, to change our emotional state at that moment, there are physical things we can do that can help with that. Breathing and regulation, grounding or orientation, movement and release, meditation, walking and exercise, being outdoors. There's ways that we can physically do things that will help to adjust or in that moment can make an adjustment for us in just that moment. So there are ways we can cope by doing these different things. So just breathing. Let's do this right now. We'll just practice the breathing piece. And with the breathing, it's focus on the next breath that you take and pay attention to it. Most of us breathe and don't know we're breathing. But in this exercise, you're going to focus in and you're going to recognize that you are breathing. And with every breath, you'll focus on that breath. When you breathe that breath in through your nose, you feel it in the back, the cool air in the back of your throat. And when you release that breath, you feel that warm air coming out. Right? You don't have to deep breathe. You can, but you don't have to. You can just breathe um, and focus on that breathing. And that can actually help calm us. And if you want to, you can give your breaths a word. You can think of a word that's a power word for you, that's an uplifting word in your life, and use that word and breathe that in. Right? For me, a word is patience. So I'm going to breathe in patience, and I'm going to breathe out fear. Right? And we begin to regulate ourselves. There's some other things you can do with breathing. I'm not a breath expert, but I've sat under some people who've done some different things. I have a person who taught me how to do a sigh breath, SIGH, like you're sighing. Like sometimes you'll just do a little breath like that, and someone will go, "Oh, what's wrong?" He's like, "I don't know. I just needed some oxygen." Right? You can choose to do a sigh breath, and you can just do a couple in a row, just to and that itself can regulate us a little bit physically, right? Just that little extra that we need. Grounding can be another thing where you're focusing on the fact, just putting your feet flat on the ground. If you're standing and just tap your feet back and forth, feel the ground and the steadiness and tell yourself, the ground has me. I'm steady. I'm okay. I'm in this place right here. I'm standing on this solid ground. The ground's not moving. It's not going anywhere. It has me. Or you sitting in a chair and you say the same thing. You think about that, sitting in that chair and feeling the chair under your weight on the chair and the chair under you, and it's holding you, right? Is there ways that you can ground yourself? And often, if you'll move like tap your right foot and then your left foot and think about it as you do that, or your hands, or maybe flex muscles in your body and release those muscles. Those are ways that we ground ourselves, and physically we can help to cope. um, Movement and release. Anytime you can get up and just and just move, right? Some of this people will do dancing, or they'll move around, flail your arms, just uh, let go of any worry that anyone's going to judge you by it, and you just move. You shake your hands out, shake your arms out, shake your shoulders, shake your legs. Just feel it throughout your body. All of those things begin to regulate you. Meditation, of course, is a way that we can regulate ourselves physically and mentally and emotionally. Walking, just getting out and moving. You ever just find yourself sitting in a house, you're so depressed, you're so anxious, you're like, I don't know if I can do this. I just feel heavy. It all is on, it's on me. I feel so heavy. Sometimes just getting out and moving. The answer to heaviness is move. Just move. Change my location. Get up and go to a new location. Find a new spot because this spot isn't working for me, right? Um, or just being outdoors, just getting outside in nature while we still can. And I know it's hot. It's hot right here. I live in Florida and it is really hot. So we're staying kind of out inside during the day, but in the evening when we can get out, getting out and getting into that fresh air and getting into nature. Um, Creativity is another form of coping. And so, again, I won't spend time on each one of these, but these are just examples. Letter writing, journaling, stream of consciousness. Sometimes people say, I'm not a great writer. Then don't worry about the sentences and the periods and, doing it perfectly. Just get some stuff down, do a stream of conscious, get some sentence starters. If I could, I would. My hope for my family is, my hope for my future, my I wish, like right, whatever it is, just do a stream of consciousness and just write things down. Crafting or painting or creating, poetry, songwriting, music and movement. Create a playlist. Create a playlist that is specific to grief, and create a playlist that is specific to living and life, and think about what those are for you and play it when you feel like you need that. Those are all ways that we can cope. um, Support seeking is another coping skill, and that could be attending a support group, but it could also be identifying a mentor. Support groups aren't for everyone. Some people go into a group and they say, I have trouble holding that space, but I could talk with an individual and make a connection there, or just building a support system, going to friends and family and saying, look, when you said this after my person died, I was offended, and I've separated myself from you, but I still need you in my life. And so I wanted to tell you about this, and I wanted to tell you what it is I do need, and create that support system for yourself, or just seeking advice or ideas from other people who've walked where you're walking, right? And go to them and say, what was it like for you? So that you can have that knowledge and gain perspective in that way. And just a couple of more contemplative coping practices, reading books and articles. And I know sometimes early in our grief, we can't even hold any new information. We're just so distracted. And I get that. Be patient with yourself, uh, but keep trying. And that time will come when you will be able to hold that. And reading books, articles, any information on grief and coping, any way that we can get ourselves good information is helpful for us. Explore research and information on grief and coping. Go look it up yourself. Don't wait on someone like me or anyone else to tell you what the research says. Go look it up. It's accessible to you. Consider your options. Think about, what options do I have? And I know a lot of times in our grief, we feel like we don't have any options. And please don't hear me say that we're choosing grief. You don't choose grief, right? Grief is something we're experiencing, we're living. But there are choices we make in the midst of our grief that matter. And so considering what options are available to us, problem solving practices and models, journaling, again, that stream of consciousness, that actually is a contemplative practice. And then giving grief words. And I've said this before earlier in our talk, just do it for yourself. Even if you're not doing it for other people, just try to give it words for yourself. When we can give something words, we have a little more power over it because we named it. We know what it is now. It's not a surprise. I can name it. Write that down. Last couple of them. balance. Balance is a coping mechanism. And a lot, we don't think of it that way, but it sort of is. It it goes back to there's a theory of grief support called the dual 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 model of grief support. And the idea is that you are oscillating between life orientation and loss orientation. So you're not overly spending on either one, but you're leaning into both. You're not just avoiding the loss orientation, grief, the pain. You're also leaning into living and life and relationships, but you're not just focused there. You're also leaning into the loss orientation, giving yourself permission to take short breaks from grief. And remember, if we're an intuitive griever, we might have a harder time doing that. Those who are instrumental grievers tend to be able to take these little breaks, and compartmentalize and focus attention. Now, they can also be a negative in our lives if we're overdoing that. We're if we're doing things just to avoid our grief. So avoidant behavior. Avoidant behavior can be helpful in small doses. Long term tends to lead to things like depression and anxiety, and we're pushing all that into our bodies and we're carrying that. But redirecting our attention to other tasks and activities from time to time can be helpful. And sometimes I've found with a lot of folks when we're grieving, in the most intense places of our grief, when we can stop and hear someone else's grief and pain, we're not thinking about ours at that moment, and so we can kind of lean into a little bit for someone else. Now, some people have a harder time. They hear someone else's, and it just takes them right back to their own grief and pain. I understand that. It's all about we all grieve differently. Leaning into daily tasks or work, sometimes just focusing in on something, like I said, woodworking or knitting or taking a hike and focusing on nature around us, whatever that might look like. And then sometimes just creating new routines and hobbies that are unrelated to our loss, or our grief. Right. So those are just a few of those, kind of ideas around this idea of being intuitive, a griever or an instrumental griever, or how do we find that balance, or what does that look like? Now, once we can discover the people in our lives and what their tendencies are, this is where we can start by recalculating the way we think about the people around us in our family and our role in their lives, and seeing our role more as supportive and compassionate versus minimizing and alienating. Because quite often, when we work to try to fix people or change them or have them grieve like we are, what happens, the person who's receiving that is feeling as though you are minimizing their experience and then alienating them because they're thinking you're not a safe person. I can't really share with you what it's like for me because you believe I'm doing it wrong. And so I'm going to just stop sharing that with you. And so no progress is made in the relationship, and really no growth is made individually outside of the relationship, because there's never that opportunity to have a meaningful, honest conversation in a way that's not judgmental, that is where we walk with one another and beside one another, as opposed to trying to pull one another along. So let's look at a few of these examples of minimizing or alienating actions first. Just kind of, these are the things that tend to have people feel like, okay, this person doesn't get me and doesn't understand my grief. Silver lining lectures, you know what I mean by that? That, at least this, we're trying to find the good in it. Well, at least you have other kids, or at least you can have more kids, or at least, at least you have your health. Pretty much anything that starts with the word at least is probably not helpful to other people, minimizes people's experiences, and alienates people from others and the support that they might need. Instructing and directing. That's the person who's finger pointing, telling you how to grieve or what that looks like, and this is what you ought to do. I found even in the webinars, when I'm sharing information, it's just information. That's all it is. It may apply to you, it may not apply to you. Take what you want, don't take what doesn't work or what doesn't fit. We all are individuals, we all grieve differently. But this idea of the individuals in our lives and they become instructors and directors in our lives as opposed to companions in our lives. The shoulds, shoulding on people, telling people what they ought to be doing, punishing a person because they're behaving a certain way. Well, if you're going to behave that way, I'm not having anything to do with you. Now, again, let me just say, if it's destructive behavior or harmful behavior to you, yes, by all means, separate yourself from that. You don't have to be in that relationship. But sometimes we punish people when they don't do things the way we want them to do it. And that's never helpful. Or engaging in a debate. No, this is how you do it. No, this is how you do it. No, this is how you do it. And the reality is, it, you're both doing it in a different way, and that can be okay. Trying to fix a person, make it better for them, suggestions for getting over their grief. Here, if you'll do these 5 things, it'll help you get over this. Suggesting others do it my way. Let me tell you how I do it, and that should work for you because this is what worked for me. And then the last one is just diagnosing people sitting around going, maybe you have this, or maybe you need to go to a doctor and you have these symptoms. This is what may be going on with you. Something's not right with you. Any of these types of approaches to interacting with our fellow family members, with friends, with people around us who are grieving, uh, tends to minimize their experience and alienate them from us. It has the opposite effect of what we're wanting it to have in our lives. So instead, one of the things that we can do is we can redirect our attention and look at some of these principles for uh, these principles for compassionate relationships. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of talk through each of these. Seek knowledge and understanding. So avoid passing judgment. Instead of judging and deciding ahead of time, just seek to know and understand. Ask them what it's like for them. Pay attention to what it's like for them. There's a phrase that I picked up years ago: all behavior has a purpose. So when you see someone behaving some way that you don't understand, it doesn't make sense to you, remind yourself, but all behavior has a purpose. It means something to them. It somehow matters to them and it's important to them. So seek knowledge and understanding. Be empathetic. Listen with your heart, not just with your head. Just let your heart be touched that this person is experiencing something on some level. And I may not fully understand it, but I'm going to be empathetic about their situation. Practice patience, practice patient presence. So practice being patient with a person and holding that space for them. Meet them where they are. Don't expect someone to grieve or cope in a way that may not work for them. Be patient as people are learning their footing when they're grieving and they've had a loss. Be in relationship with, walk alongside, rather than pulling people along or directing. I'm going to be in relationship with you here, where you are. I'm going to walk alongside you. Um, Alan Wolfelt calls it companioning, being with someone in their journey. Respect boundaries. Know where you end and other people begin. There's no reason to meddle or anything like that into anyone else's, try to convince them to share something with you. Just respect those boundaries. Respect that people have private pain and private grief, and that could be true in our own families. And maybe they just don't have words for it yet and don't know how to begin to express it. And so I want to respect that boundary and not push too hard on you. Make yourself available. So dedicate time and attention. Be thoughtful about, be intentional. That's the word. Be intentional about spending time with that person, even though you may not understand their behavior. Be with them, dedicate time and attention, keep inviting them to go or to be part of. And if they don't go, then go be with them. Just be with them in their setting. Let them lead and you follow. Invite dialogue. Notice the word is invite dialogue, not demand it. So you might say, well, I invite it and they never take me up on it. And that's okay. Just don't stop inviting. Keep inviting. The time might come when they finally share and speak up. I've seen this happen in support groups numerous times where someone comes, they don't talk, they don't talk, they don't talk, they don't talk. And it can be months into coming, or even I've had some people who came for many months, even over a year, and then finally started sharing. They were getting something from the conversation. So invite that dialogue. Effective and active listening. Listening in an effective and active way. And I like to think of this as just holding space for people's pain. Practicing truly hearing people. Instead of thinking about what am I going to say in response to whatever they're going to say or whatever they're saying, clear your head of that. Just think to yourself, I'm not going to share anything right now. I'm simply going to be curious and I'm going to stay with what they're sharing. Effective and active listening actually works very well with a person who's intuitive and a person who is instrumental in the way that they grieve. So just paying close attention to what they're telling you and be with their story. Don't make it about your story. And then two more. Support their solutions, not yours. They may come up with something and don't shoot it down. Don't say, no, that's not going to work. Well, I tried that. It didn't work for me. Support people's solutions. It may work for them. And if it doesn't work for them, then you're still there. They're not alone. They have you in their life and you're still connected to them because you're supportive and you can learn together. So it doesn't always have to be your way. They may have their way for helping people and they're finding their way. And it's hard. And you say, well, gosh, their life is such a mess. Yes, grief is messy. Loss is messy. Profound loss is debilitating and disruptive beyond anything that anyone can imagine unless you've been through it. So walk with a person, be with them. It doesn't have to be your way. Think about what works with them and be present with them. And then the last thing is just share honest conversations. And I made this the last thing because some people, when I share this, they'll go, oh, okay, so I can. So basically I can say to them, I'm worried about you and you need to do this. That's not what I'm saying here. What I am saying, though, is that if you are concerned for someone, it's okay to tell them you're concerned. But being concerned is not an excuse to manipulate them to do it your way. It's simply expressing your concern. It's seeing something that you feel like is concerning and might be a problem for them down the road. It's okay to do that, but it's best done. Honest conversations are best had in relationship with someone. Do these other 9 things first. Establish that and establish a strong rapport with the people in your life who are closest to you in your family. Have them have a relationship where they know that you're there no matter what, unconditionally, and you're present fully with that person. It's in that we're more likely to be able to have an honest conversation where we can reflect back what we're seeing. I noticed the other day when this and then this happened. And we're simply reflecting to someone. There's a saying that we can without a mirror, we only see about 70% of ourselves. We can't see ourselves fully. Can't even see my own face without a mirror. We can be mirrors for other people, but we don't need to be, again, finger pointing and all of those things. We simply are reflecting back to them what we're seeing in relationship with them. The relationship is so important. And then sharing our concerns with humility, saying things like, I wonder if, rather than, here's what you need to do. Quite often, there's so many things in grief that are just gray. They're not black and white. And when we say this will do it for you right here, do this and it'll all be better. We often are selling a person a false bill of goods, right? Um, because the reality is it's not that simple. But just share what you're noticing in humility and then being willing to practice all nine of these other things with them in relationship. We'll get a lot further in our relationships with one another if we can lean on these 10 principles. So we're coming close to the end of our time. I just want to recap briefly. When it comes to understanding other people and their grief styles, start with that understanding, start with their personality. We all have a personality. Get to know that personality. If you can sit down and take a personality inventory, do it. If you can't, it's fine. Sit down and get a piece of paper and write down their name, write 5 adjectives that describe them, and then say to yourself, how can I be fully present with this person as they are, not as I want them to be, as they are. And then as we do that, think about, pay attention to how that person tends to grieve. Are they an intuitive griever? Are they an instrumental griever? Right. And then how can I be with them in relationship? Seek knowledge, be empathetic, practice patience, be in relationship with, respect boundaries, making ourselves available, inviting dialogue, not demanding it, practicing effective and active listening, supporting their solutions, and then in that, having honest conversations with one another. We've reached the end of our hour. I hope that this was helpful in building a little perspective about others in your life, those who are around you. Maybe this can be useful to share with others just in your life that you want to say, you want to understand what's going on better and how to be with me. Here's some ways that you can do that. I bid you all a peaceful rest of your day. Please visit us at compassionatefriends.org. Look at all the things that we have going on around Compassionate Friends. Go to our webinar page. There's archives. This will be made available in archive in the next coming days. And we will send an email out in the next day or two that will have these slides available for you to have as a resource. So again, thank you. Bid you all a peaceful rest of your day.